Welcome to Mastering CS Candid Leader Insights, the podcast where we dive into the world of customer success with industry leaders. I'm your host, Irina Cismas, and today I'm joined by Silvana Prodan, Team Lead Customer Success at Bloomflow, a platform that helps large organizations deploy and manage their innovation programs. Silvana, I'm really happy to have you here. Thanks for joining.
Thank you for the invitation, Irina. Nice to meet you.
You are helping companies like Nestle and Michelin manage their innovation programs. For people who haven't come across Bloomflow before, walk us through what that actually looks like in practice.
To be honest, it really depends on the client. There's no easy answer to this one, but so Bloomflow is a platform allowing companies to innovate faster, better by leveraging information they have and collaboration. So this is the baseline and we start from there and we adapt it to every client. Usually we work with companies having teams that need to collaborate, coming from different departments, different countries, different cultures, and so on. And we make it happen.
In that setup, what do you spend most of your time on?
Again, a tricky question because, like, we're in 2026, and I already feel that my way of working this year changed and is constantly changing. So, I think in 2024 and 2025, we spent a lot of time in client meetings and also then in taking the meeting notes, putting everything nicely, thinking of the next steps. And now we automatize the meeting notes with Fathom. We have Gemini internally helping us gather insights. Whenever a customer asks for how to onboard the teams in a fast way, you just insert information into Claude and then it gives you the slides and so on. So we have more time to think, to do the critical thinking part that the AI cannot do. They can, but sometimes you need the human knowledge of how the
Mhm.
person actually is, but it can be a trap because sometimes you work faster and you are like a robot and then you forget to do the critical thinking part. So I think this year my focus is on working with AI but also working with my brain and not forgetting about like my brain power.
I think it's very. One of the previous guests told me that it's very important to leverage the benefits of the AI, but you should be the one who is leading the AI and not the other way around. Because when AI basically leads the conversation, the outcome and the output is basically in line. So, yeah, combining the critical thinking and what you've learned along the years of experience that you accumulate, it's something that you should leverage, and you should be the one guiding the AI.
Exactly.
Speaking about the background, yours is very interesting because you have a PhD, you've interpreted at conferences, you worked at the ACB, and that's a very different background for a CSM.
Yes.
And I'm curious, what does all of that actually give you when you are sitting in front of a client?
Yeah, so I studied German, English, and then French. Romanian is my mother tongue, and I was always interested in languages. So I worked with languages as a freelancer. So I was a translator as the ECB. Then I did conference interpreting, where I interpreted a lot in factories in Germany that had to outsource to Romania, for example, but also at events. Even though I worked with languages, like when you're a freelancer, you need to be customer first because you sell yourself. So with COVID, all my conferences disappeared. So I looked for a stable job, and the IT sector was the one hiring. So I moved from Bucharest to Paris, and I started doing renewals, project manager, management, and now customer success. And I really like customer success because where I work at Bloomflow, I have international clients. So I
Mhm.
speak German, English, and French, depending on the client. I also lived in Germany, in Austria, and so on. So I think I understand the culture in a different way. And sometimes stereotypes are true, but we can leverage stereotypes as CSM. I don't know, I'm never late with German clients, except I don't know if I have a car accident. But if a French client does not show up at 0.00, you're fine. You need to wait 2 more minutes. So it's the small things that that I know of that sometimes help. And yeah, it's customer first when you're a customer success manager. And what also helps from interpreting, because I visited so many factories, I understand the processes like from the top level until the very low level of people clicking on a button and on a machine. And I think that also helps in my job.
When you entered into the CS world, what did you find the hardest thing to do? What was, with all the background that you have, what was the most challenging part that you couldn't easily adapt to?
I think it was getting the big picture and not being lost in the detail,
Mhm.
because I was like a project manager in the beginning. So you see the client, you have the small next steps, you have the next meeting and so on. But when you're a CSM, you always need to think in terms of the big picture, like how do the small steps create something big? How do they create success? How can you do your upsell, your renewal? How can you increase adoption and so on? So not getting lost in detail. And also when you're freelancing, you help and so on, because you sell yourself and you sell
Mhm.
services. It's the same when you're a customer success manager, but some clients view you as a customer support manager.
Mhm.
And that was also like I had to learn to say no and redirect them to support.
I'm wondering, when you are working inside a company like Michelin, you are not dealing with one stakeholder. You are aligning executives, operations, IT, compliance. Where does that usually break down?
Break down in terms of what happens or in terms of,
In terms of what happens?
yeah. So it depends. We always have the sponsor and the champions. So
Mhm.
most of the time we're in touch with the champions, but the sponsor needs to know what's happening because it's their money and we need to prove our value. So
Mhm.
we always adapt, I think. Adapting, that's the key word. There's
And
no,
do you
yeah.
try to provide value to champions or to sponsors? Because I think it's in some cases, or at least in some cases, I wouldn't say that they have different objectives, but it's hard to please both of them. How is it in your case?
What works for me is setting success KPIs at the
Mhm.
beginning of the renewal. Success KPIs should make both the champion and the sponsor happy. So on a daily basis, I think we help the champion more, or they feel that we help them more because they are the one behind the platform. They are the one with us in the trainings. They are the one asking for product enhancements. But then we also help the sponsor. It's just that the sponsor sees us twice, 3 times a year, and we really need to prove that we delivered those 2, 3 times. And also, you need to make the champion look good when you see the sponsor. So that's why if you have the KPIs that you set up well in the beginning, I think both of them like what you're doing and both of them benefit, and you also benefit. If a client is happy, Bloomflow is happy.
Of course. That goes, I think that's general, regardless the company, the industry. I'm curious, how do you manage to talk to the sponsors? Because they are usually super busy. They don't have time to spend in meetings with you. Most of the time, or in the cases I interacted with, they ghost you. How do you capture their attention, and how do you do that without looking the champion or without putting the champion in a bad light? Because usually the champion prefers to be the point of contact, but you also need to tag along with the sponsor. How do you navigate this situation?
So we meet the sponsor at least once a time during the annual review. If
Mhm.
the champion sometimes blocks you saying, I will talk to the sponsor,
I know it's frequent. I This is why I asked, because it's a frequent scenario.
and you don't want to break trust, right? So I personally I put the sponsor in CC whenever we deliver something big or whenever my email contains doesn't focus on the small things but on the big things. Like sometimes the sponsors do not come to the roadmap meetings, and I know we
Mhm.
are doing something really awesome. So I always CC them or writing to them directly if I can. And sometimes you also have our C levels that are in touch with sponsors. So I also ask the C levels to see if they cannot call the sponsor and give them some news and so on. So I do not break trust, but I CC and I involve the C levels. And actually, CCing the sponsor is not breaking trust, and it's something easy to do, but you need not to forget it because you don't talk to the sponsor every day and you tend to forget it. It's yeah, that's where we need automation, maybe.
Did it ever, and were you in a situation where it was a tough conversation on a renewal, even if you had an awesome relationship with the champion, but the sponsor was not sold on your platform?
Yes, it happens. Now some budgets get tighter, so
Yes.
renewals become more difficult. I think it's the reality the industry is facing. And the renewal can get difficult if our platform is a nice to have and not a must have. When it happens, I try to be, and I am transparent and honest on my end, but I also ask them to be honest. What is your budget and what are the key features you're using? What do you want to achieve as a company during this renewal to see where Bloomflow can match the company goals, the champion internal goals, and what the sponsor also needs to show.
Let's stay on that. You've trained 300 plus users across 20 plus platforms. What does good adoption actually look like in that environment? How do you know it's actually real and not just people logging in and testing things in the platform?
So we have our internal KPIs that we use for adoption. And on the platform, we have a difference between visitors and contributors. So visitors, they only have a look every now and then. And if it's a C level having a look, then that's good because a C level will not have the time to click and so on. But we want to have many contributors with many contributions. And we also have a look at data quality. So we need to have companies with contacts attached to them and so on. We have certain things we track. So basically data quality, the quantity of contributions, and
Mhm.
all several teams from different regions using the platform. Because if I have a team from Bucharest, one from France, and one from Germany using, it means they are collaborating and it means that the platform is doing its purpose.
You mentioned something important, data quality. Yeah, and it's one of the pains of the CS industry. How do you guys manage to keep that data quality? What does it take? Who needs to be involved in order to make sure that this happens?
So there's the data quality of the client data, the
Okay.
data the clients places on the platform. And on the platform, we have a data quality tab, and
Okay.
they have three things they can track. And me as a CSM, like during the monthly meetings, that's the first thing I check with them, with the
Mhm.
champions. I will not fix it, but I will tell them, listen, here's where you're at, have a
Mhm.
look. And then there's the data quality of the data the CSM gathers.
Exactly. Tell me about this part.
That was your part. So when I started in 2024 at Bloomflow, I was writing the meeting minutes by hand. Now I copy paste the Fathom, and I realized that the dynamics changed a bit because we have a lot more quantity, but we do not have the same insight like the human touch, meaning my feelings about the champion being a bit, I don't know, uneasy about something. What I do now is that I double check the face and meeting notes and change them a bit because it
Mhm.
honestly takes me 5 minutes in the short term, but it
Mhm.
helps me a lot on the long term. And we also automatized some actions. So the action points from Fathom are automatized and so on. And it helps me keep track of what is happening and also it helps with data quality, because when you check your action list, oh, this happened, this doesn't sound right. So I think it's always AI 90% and 10% of Silvana.
And that's actually 10% is actually what makes the difference, because I think it's the most important part. It's the tip of the iceberg, but it's the most important thing. Tell me, you mentioned about meeting, automating the meeting notes, keeping track of all this. What what else do you do to be more, what other tools and processes you are relying on to keep everything visible and to make sure that you free up most of your time so that you can spend into analyzing, overviewing, and connecting the dots between what the client needs and what your product and your platform can provide? What
So
helps you?
So internally, we share the information in the customer success team, and also with the entire company. We use Slack internally. I know other people use Teams and Google and so on. And we also have red carpet presentations where we present a client. And I think preparing for the red carpet helps, because that's where you have a look at the big picture. And also, like personally, I block 1 hour every day just to have a look at the meetings and to think about what happened and to insert the qualitative part in my notes. And same, we have no meeting Friday afternoons on
Okay.
the. So basically, just blocking time helps. And it might sound silly, but it's not,
It's
because
not.
as a CSM, you have so many meeting requests. And if you do 5 meetings without thinking of them at the end of the day when the information is fresh, I personally forget like half of the things. So
For sure. Yep.
my personal method is finalizing my meeting minutes and so on at the end of the day. And we automatize. If you have a good
Mhm.
automation is really powerful. I don't know. The we receive reminders, I don't know, 120 days before the renewal, because
Mhm.
if you have a very busy period, you might forget. It's easy.
Indeed. You've moved through a lot of different worlds, from interpreting to research to project management, and now you are in the CS. Is there something from one of those phases that still shapes how you show up today?
I think so. I have a PhD in communication and I teach part-time at a French university. And I think it's the part where you really show up and are when you are 100% that
Mhm.
shapes how I am at work. I hope that's true, but that's how I see things. So, yeah, I still have a sweet spot for university as well and for teaching. And I like to think that as a CSM, it's the same. When you're a teacher, you need to be 100% there for your students and you need to bring something. Students shouldn't lose their time with you. And I think it's the same work ethic that I try to apply at Bloomflow.
One last question, because with your background, I'm super curious. If someone would come and ask you what, or if someone was considering entering the CS world, what would be your advice for them? What would they take into account? What are the goods and the bads? And when should they reconsider the CS overall?
So I think as a CSM, the mantra needs to be client first. The second mantra should be deliver or say yes or advance when you're 80% sure. Never wait for the 100%, because those 20% extra will happen if you push. And say no, but also say yes. And I think people should reconsider if they're uncomfortable with change. If they are like, you can be a good CSM if you're very analytical, but if you're uncomfortable with the unknown, with change, with dynamics, with clients changing, the product team shifting focus, and so on, maybe you should focus more on project management. I think a CSM is a project manager that can sell and is a bit more creative.
Silvana, this was an interesting conversation. Thank you so much for joining.
Thank you,
And
Irina, for the invitation. Yeah.
to everyone listening, thanks for tuning in. Until next time, stay curious, keep learning, and mastering customer success.